held the Amplitron. This one here held the Tetrode driver. It was a 100 kilowatt power stage that drove the multi-megawatt pulse power amplifier in this room here. You can see the RF filtering. Now we're inside the Amplitron room. You see these huge cabinets. Here is an Amplitron. This is with the upper magnet off, showing the blue top of the tube. This is a tube that's 6 foot long. You can see what pulled it out of its socket. You can imagine a socket this big. This is the power control. Very large motor-driven variacs that only change the voltage by about 20%. You can see many different breakers, power line filters, big contactors. This is what they turn the thing on and off with. They didn't use big knife switches in these days. Here you can see where the rectifiers were, the main rectifiers. This monstrosity is the power transformer. I'd like to run your transistor radio on that. This is where more rectifiers were. There were filter capacitors up in here. Down in there is a huge inductor or a choke. You see a chassis hanging on for dear life. This is the pulse modulator, the low-level part of the pulse modulator. Here they had the pulse damping diodes. This monster down below is the charging reactor in the pulse forming network. You can see part of the pulse forming network, that big copper-colored coil. Over to our left, you can see a very large step-down transformer. This is what sent the pulse downstairs to the underground for the Delta T antenna. This transformer right here. You can see it says Sperry on it, an FPS 35. This was the auxiliary pulse drive transformer. You can see more pulse forming network. The big studs held the very large capacitors. This is where the thyratrons were. There were 4 of them in parallel that fired off the big pulse coil in the base of the Amplitron assembly. More pulse forming network material. Each transmitter had 25 pulse forming capacitors in it, tapped on that big copper coil. Now we're in the IPA Tetrode driver room. The government took this with them. But this is the same size as the other room. You can see how much equipment was in the other room. We're seeing another shot of the low-level driver area. This we saw downstairs. We're now up on the 4th floor of the radar tower. There were 2 redundant transmitters in this building. Here we're seeing the very large control panel. There was one of these on each floor. They control each transmitter from its own control panel. This is the overall control panel. As you can see, lots of switches to throw. You had to be an engineer literally to run this thing. Here we see where Preston cut apart the main power distribution for the transmitter. This was when Junior was out and we were trying to shut the transmitter down. These were just regular power boxes. Why would anybody want them? There's tons of power boxes on this base. This is up on the 4th floor. And you can see the torch marks on the wall. We're inside the Tetrode room, the 100 kilowatt driver upstairs. Here's the high-pot tester that we use to test the Amplitrons for high voltage breakdown. That thing put out 100, 200 kilovolts. Now we're looking inside the upper Amplitron room with the upper magnet on it. Interesting thing will happen. The picture all of a sudden fades out. Something jammed the camera here. Now we're looking at a closer shot of the upper Amplitron with its magnet on. You can see torch marks. Now they're becoming more visible, the torch marks. This is where Preston cut the waveguides out to actually stop this transmitter from transmitting. Just imagine the power that went through this room. This is the AIO computer. This processed the thought forms. This is a modified IFF computer. I remember performing massive modifications. We can see a label here, Power Supply Subassembly MX3116 GLA Airborne Instruments Laboratory, a division of Cutler Hammer Inc. US. This was made in about the 60s. This was put in the SAGE radar to jam-proof it, and also for IFF, that's identification friend or foe. We just saw the canister where the big crystal plates were held. This computer is huge. We're looking at the back end of it now. This was a vacuum tube computer. This made lots and lots of heat. This is one of the chassis that sits on the floor from the AIO computer. Somebody pulled these chassis out. For what, we don't know.